Welcome to the Center of Light Radio with spiritual teacher, intuitive, musician, composer, and best-selling author of The Divine Principle, Anchoring Heaven on Earth, your host, Keith Anthony Blanchard.
Strapping all ye brother and sister astronauts as we launch for inner space. Keith Anthony Blanchard here, your host of Center of Light Radio. Center of Divine Unfoldment and Reinforcement. Superhighway to knowledge for that which is most important. And that would be you. You are important to me. You matter to me. Your life matters to me. I would like to see you blissful. That being said, it's not about fixing you because you're broken. But if you want some more expansion in your life, go to centeroflightradio.com. Look at the bottom right-hand side of the opening page. You will see a subscription form. Fill that thing out. I will not send you junk. I will send you my monthly newsletter, what I put a lot of time into to find very empowering subjects, very empowering information. And I like to pay that forward. I like to put that in your hands so you can implement that in your life. And next thing you know, you're beating your feet towards your bliss. You know, you have to take that step sometimes. You have to jump off the cliff. You know, if you have a little doubt, you may need a parachute. You may need a glider of some sort, but at least jump into your life, the reason you were born, jump into your passion. You know, people often claim they have a fear of death. I don't believe in that. I don't believe that people really have a fear of death. I think they have a fear of regret, that when they live their life, when it comes to that precious time when you lay your body down, that as they reflect back, it's filled with regret. The most amazing transition in life is death, ironically. So make sure you actually start taking on the habit of doing what brings you joy, that what fills your heart. But also, that same subscription form that you fill out, you will have access to my R.P.M program, Recognize, Plug In, and Manifest Your Life. You want that red Ferrari? You can have it. You want money? You can have it. You want spiritual liberation? You want peace? You can have it. It's all the same idea across the board. And I promise you, this is my lifelong work. When you take the time to study this program, it's a once monthly. I will send you an installment, and it's a year course. And I'm telling you, by the end of this program in a year, you will be so transformed. You're going to be contacting me. Heck, you probably be flying over my house with your angel wings. Go to Center of Light Radio and fill out that subscription form. Also, I've been providing services for many, many years, public speaking. You know, I've spoken about avatars, God-men, if you will, divine incarnations, extraterrestrials. I've been helping people live their passions for a very long time. If you need me for public speaking, you can contact me at keithanthonyblanchard@gmail.com. I can do spiritual readings, life coaching as well. And something that's been coming to my attention here and there over my life was helping people remove dark entities from their life. You know, there's a lot of misnomer about ghosts and dark entities and attachments. Regardless, it doesn't matter. You got squatters in your house and they're not paying rent. Let's get those spiritual puppies out of your house so you can move on and have some peace. You can contact me for all those at keithanthonyblanchard@gmail.com. No word from Swamiji Viswayogi, God realized man from India, yet about when he's coming to Memphis, Tennessee, and we can get him on Center of Light Radio to do yet another phenomenal, enlightening interview. Being in the presence of this man is just so powerful. If you have not been in the presence of such a divine man, just imagine what it would be like standing next to an embodiment of God realized. I mean, there's something to be felt there, not to be said, because words only sully the experience. Also, while you're at Center of Light Radio and you filled out, let's for example, you just filled out that subscription form. Look right next to the left. You'll see a movie banner. And the meek shall inherit the earth, the prophecy realized. It's free. Why not? Check it out. It'll help you gain perspective about what's going on in the world that can sometimes seem crazy and move us off of our center, our heart space, because we feel for the world and we look out there and it's convincing that we see terrorism and hunger and all that stuff. And of course, our compassion kicks into gear and we're ready to be of service. And that's an amazing, powerful, beautiful thing that you want to help your brothers and sisters across the planet. That's really, really awesome. But equally, and sometimes probably more powerfully than the actual physical, is surrounding everything with light, submersing everything in light, bathing it in light, saturated with light in your genuine intention. That will do an amazing wonder to some of the anomalies, some of the crazy things that are just happening in the world that we all are longing for peace about. And while you're at Center of Light Radio, finally, go to Do What You Love Forever course tab. It has my lifelong work. You get my bestseller, The Divine Principle, Self-Reflection Workbook, Divine Daily Supplements, Do What You Love, A Path to Passionate Living, the movie about my life made by Blue Cast Productions out of New York, The Divine Principle audio. I mean, there's tons of stuff, and I still run a special for $5. You can't beat that. And it's all digital downloads, so you get it immediately. Now it's time to get down to Center of Light Radio business. Today, my guest is Craig Pearson, and we will be discussing the Supreme Awakening, experiences of enlightenment throughout time. Let me tell you about my guest today. Craig Pearson is Vice President of Academic Affairs, Maharishi University of Management in Fairfield, Iowa, and a leader in its unique consciousness-based approach. He is the author of 2 books, The Supreme Awakening, Experiences of Enlightenment Throughout Time, and How You Can Cultivate Them, the complete book of Yogic Flying. Ooh, I love that. He has spoken around the United States on higher stages of human development. Dr. Pearson holds a PhD in Maharishi Vedic Science from Maharishi University of Management. He is also the co-author with Brad Moses of Peace on Earth. That is so my gig. I love that phrase, Peace on Earth. A collection of songs about enlightenment and world peace, and that is available on iTunes. Let me repeat that again. He's co-author with Brad Moses of Peace on Earth, a collection of songs about enlightenment and world peace, available on iTunes. Welcome to Center of Light Radio, Mr. Craig Pearson.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be with you. Thank you for inviting me today.
Yes. Let's get right down into the meat and potatoes. What is the Supreme Awakening? What does it mean, awakening in the human experience?
The Supreme Awakening refers to the experience of heightened human consciousness. And when I say heightened, I mean the brain, literally the brain, physiology, and consciousness functioning the way they were designed to function, which is in a state of very heightened wakefulness. And the more alert and awake consciousness is, the more of our potential that we're using. It was Henry David Thoreau who said, to be awake is to be alive. And it was William James, the father of modern psychology, who said, compared with what we ought to be, we're only half awake. So we can think of higher human development, we can think of enlightenment as just a ramped up state of wakefulness.
So how does one become awake? How does one become ramped up? How does one become alive?
Well, let me answer that with what's really been fascinating for me and what's been the topic of my last book.
Sure.
And that will lead into the how. But one of the starting points for me is that when you look into the literature of history around the world, and when you know what you're looking for, and when you have enough persistence, you can find some of the greatest people in history describing experiences of the Supreme Awakening, experiences of extraordinary wakefulness. In the Eastern world, we find this in the writings of Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching. We find it in the words attributed to the Buddha. In the West, when you read Plato and Plotinus and know what you're looking for, we find descriptions not just of a philosophical concept of heightened wakefulness and enlightenment, but of the actual firsthand experience. And coming down later through history in the West, in the Christian tradition, for example, there's St. John of the Cross and St. Teresa of Avila and many more saints who are not quite so well known. In the United States, we have writers like Walt Whitman and Ralph Waldo Emerson, and I mentioned Henry David Thoreau. In England, there are writers like William Wordsworth and so on. And remarkably, all of these people who come from such diverse backgrounds, diverse periods in history, diverse cultural milieu, diverse historical epochs. Nonetheless, they're all describing in very similar terms and with the most exalted language experiences, extraordinary experiences of heightened wakefulness, of what we could call higher states of consciousness. Sometimes they only glimpse them. Sometimes the experiences last longer. But Keith, the striking thing is that they describe them in such similar words. And my takeaway from that is what they're describing is actually a universal human experience, but it's extremely rare until now. The characteristics of that experience, while it lasts, are enormous freedom, bliss, expansion of awareness, unbounded awareness, a sense of coming into contact with underlying reality. Those 3 or 4 or 5 characteristics that I just mentioned, you can find in virtually all of these accounts from people widely separated in space and time. So again, when you know what you're looking for and you find these, you go, wow, these people really are telling us something. These are the harbingers of the news bearers of higher human potentials that actually are available to all of us.
So how does one begin? Let's say someone stumbles on this radio show, this interview. How does one begin the process of actually being able to live, to start their walk towards that higher state of consciousness?
Well, in my reading of these accounts that come through history, most of the people, as far as I can tell, these moments, these glimpses of higher human potential, these glimpses of enlightenment were spontaneous. They weren't necessarily looking for them. They didn't have a particular method or technique that they were practicing, but they were, in many cases, quite spontaneous, which means that for a few moments in their life, the brain rearranged the way it was functioning. And during our discussion here, I want to emphasize that these kinds of experiences that I'm talking about, it's not just positive thinking. It's not just some kind of new mood that you put on. It's not adopting some new outlook. It involves literally a transformation in the way the brain functions, the way the nervous system functions, that supports the subjective experience of higher human potential. And when you read these kinds of descriptions, I'd like to read you one in just a minute,
By all means.
so people can get a flavor of this.
Absolutely.
But now we know from a great deal of modern scientific research how the brain changes while these experiences are taking place. It's quite a striking story. And that tells us that these experiences, as I say, are not just some kind of power of positive thinking. They literally involve an upgrade in brain functioning, which supports a human potential. Here's a story that I just love, and let me take a few minutes to share this. If everybody who's listening could, we're going to do a little time travel here, and we're going to do a little travel through space. Probably,
I love it. One of my favorite subjects.
Yeah, probably most of your listeners are in the U.S., but you may have listeners from the world. So let's imagine that we're all rising up. And we're all traveling, at least those of us in the U.S., we are all rising up. Let's link arms on this. We're going to go across the Atlantic Ocean, and we are going to touch down in southeast England. And as we do that, we're going to go back 218 years in time. So, Keith, are you there? We're 200. The year is 1798. It's a late July morning, and we are flies on the wall, and we are watching a young man, 28 years old, waking up on this early July morning, and he's about to do something that he's looked forward to doing for weeks, which is going out, tramping through the countryside. Now, southeast England, picture ourselves right on the border between Wales and England. It's that Welsh, beautiful rolling green hills, the Wye River threading through them. It's one of the most beautiful parts of Great Britain, and anybody who lives there loves tramping, as they called it. So he goes out, loves to go out walking. He will go for several days at a time. He often goes with his sister. And so here he goes setting out, and they're walking for a couple of days along the Wye River, and he comes up over a bank and at a hilltop looking down again at the Wye River far below. And what he sees lying below him on the bank of the Wye River is this beautiful abbey, a beautiful monastery that's in ruins, even in 1798. It's there today. Beautiful stone lattice work, open to the air, open to the sunlight, open to the sky. And his sister walks on ahead, and he sits down. I like to think that he sits down under a tree and he closes his eyes for a few minutes. And an experience comes over him. And it's an experience that he's had multiple times before. In fact, it's the experience that he lives for. And he sits there and enjoys. He doesn't know where this experience comes from, doesn't know where it goes. He only knows that this is the experience that gives meaning to his life. After a short time, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, the experience passes. He opens his eyes, walks down the hill, catches up with his sister. They keep on walking for another day or two. Finally, they get back home, and it's only when they get back home that he has the opportunity now to pick up a piece of paper and a pen and write about his experience. And he starts writing, and he keeps writing nonstop. And when he finally stops, what's there on the paper in front of him is a poem, 168 lines long. And he will later say, "No poem of mine ever came to me under circumstances more pleasant to remember than this." Now, our young man, in fact, is a poet, but nobody's ever heard of him before. However, his very first book of poetry is already at the printer. So you can imagine how he feels when he has this fresh composition that's just come out. He picks it up, he rushes down to the printer, and he says, "Is there any way that we can get this poem included in the volume?" And the printer says, "You've come just in time. I haven't printed that section yet. We can include it." So this 168-line poem is printed. The book goes to press. It gets published. Within a few months, our unknown poet becomes the rock star of the British literary scene. And his little slender volume of verse changes the entire direction of English poetry. It marks the beginning of what's called the Romantic period. And whereas poetry before this book had been profound, it was always quite abstract, it was intended for educated people. Now with the beginning of this new period, the language was still beautiful, but it was more accessible to people, still very profound. And I'd like to read just a few lines from that poem that he published. And as some of your readers may have guessed, that poet is William Wordsworth, who went on within just a few years to become Poet Laureate of England. So here are a few lines that describe that particular poem, which was called "Lines Composed a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey." So this is 200 years old. The language is slightly older, but it's still quite simple and beautiful. Here I go. This is Wordsworth. He describes that blessed mood in which the burden of the mystery, in which the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened. That serene and blessed mood in which the affections gently lead us on, until the breath of this corporeal frame and even the motion of our human blood almost suspended, we are laid asleep in body and become a living soul, while with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. This is one of the most famous passages in all of world literature, and it's been read and analyzed and written about and described and discussed countless times over the past 2 centuries. And what nobody has realized until now is that right there in plain sight, right in front of us in these words, hidden from view, hidden in plain sight, so to speak, is a description of a fourth major state of consciousness. Now, people might ask, what's that? Well, I think everybody's familiar with 3 states of consciousness, and those, of course, would be waking and dreaming and deep sleep. 3 states of consciousness three different worlds of experience that we cycle through day after day after day after day. Everybody knows what the waking state is. That's what we're in right now. This is where we work, where we play, where we live, where we have our joys, our sorrows, our successes. All of that is in the waking state. Everybody knows the world of dreams, which is a kind of illusory, fantastic world where anything can happen. Everybody knows the world of sleep, where we're essentially unawake, unaware of ourselves, unaware of our surroundings. So we just take for granted that we cycle through these three different worlds without appreciating that there could be another world, there could be a fourth world, and that would represent an experience of a higher level of human potential. So this is what Wordsworth is describing for us when he says, he calls it that blessed mood, blessed, a sense of sanctity, a sense of bliss. He talks about how the heavy, weary weight of the world is as if lifted from his shoulders, so a sense of freedom, a sense of lightness. And then he talks about how the affections are gently leading us on. So he's not contriving anything. He's not straining. He's not trying to control anything. He's not trying to formulate a mood. He just feels as though he's being gently led onward, led inward. And there are a couple of lines there you might have picked up on where he speaks quite scientifically and objectively about the changes that are taking place in his body, in his physiology. He says, the breath of this corporeal frame, the corporeal frame is the body, he says, the breath of this corporeal frame and even the motion of our human blood is almost suspended. So it's just a beautiful image of human metabolism in this deep inward state with eyes closed, almost suspended. You can imagine breath slowing down, almost stopping, heart rate slowing down, the body gaining a deep state of rest. And in fact, he says, we're laid asleep in body. But he quickly, we would never think that he's actually dozing off, nodding off there above this beautiful abbey, because he says we're laid asleep in body, but we become a living soul. So what a beautiful contrast. Laid asleep in body, so the body is deeply restful, and yet he becomes a living soul, so wide awake inside, fully awake inside, as if prior to this state, he wasn't really living. It's only now that he says, I become a living soul. Only now that he says, I feel that I'm living.
Yes, very much so. So, Craig, I take it, like me, you've had moments in your life that you were given a glimpse of the higher, your true nature, and as to why you're doing what you're doing, being the doctor with a doctorate degree, but also writing these books of such. So I very well know that place of being in the place. It's the place to be.
Yes. It's beautiful. And if we had time, just there are people from throughout the world that I've mentioned their names already who describe this same experience of inward silence, inward quiet, beyond thought, beyond perception, beyond feeling, just inner quiet wakefulness where our consciousness is just awake to itself alone. And when consciousness is awake to itself alone, we experience our inner reality, our inner nature, which is unbounded, which is unlimited. And normally, that experience of our inner unbounded nature is obscured by the gotta, which is the experience of so many of us in the modern, high-pressure, fast-paced, 24/7 world. It's always, usually our consciousness is just full of thoughts, full of noise. I got to do this, I got to do that.
Yeah.
That's the normal experience of people. Whereas deep inside, whether people know it or not, it's always been there. It always will be there. At the very depth of our consciousness, the innermost resource of our mind is a field of an ocean of unbounded silence, unbounded stillness, of freedom, of bliss, of reality. That's there for
And it
everybody.
sits there and it patiently waits. It patiently waits for us to do whatever work may be required. Or, fortunate if you have it written in your script that in this lifetime some events are going to line up, and next thing you know, Craig, are you familiar with the idea, the technique that? Now, listen, on, it's just pretty powerful information, and it may take a time or two or three for you to successfully do this. For example, like when an experience is going down, it is not like a warning that something magnificent is about to happen to you. So you can't really prepare. But if you can when you find yourself in the midst of an experience that is an expanded experience, one way to plant yourself in the experience, but also to make it linger and last longer, is immediately begin doing breath work. Are you familiar with that technique, sir?
Yes.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah, it's powerful. There are. I think it's a great sign of progress in the world, rising consciousness, as we might call it. That so many people now, many more all the time, over the past couple of decades, have become interested in meditation techniques and any kind of practice that will help awaken their inner potential. When I was in college, this was many years ago, I have to admit, I knew that there was something more to life. I remember when I must have been 12, and my father said to me, scientists estimate we only use a fraction of our potential. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, how can that be? How can we be given this potential and yet not have access to it? It just seemed incongruous to me that the potential could be there, and yet we're not using it. And you look around the world at the problems that we're facing in the world, and you see the very evidence of lack of use of full potential. That's the reason why we're facing the problems that we're facing.
So, Jim, we're speaking about higher consciousness, enlightenment, and personal growth and transcendence, this kinds of stuff. Why is this almost never discussed in our society? Why?
Well, the good news is it's being discussed more, and it's being.
It is. That's a fact.
It's being discussed. And people are having more experiences like that. I think. That's the case. It hadn't been discussed. You look back to the 1980s, 70s, 60s, and earlier, and at that time, you mentioned the notion of meditation, and the common understanding then was meditation, that's something from the East. It really doesn't have any relevance in the West. It's not something that practical, certainly not, relevant for somebody with responsibility. It was associated with people who were reclusive lives, monks and nuns and yogis and so on. That has so changed, and especially in the last 10 years, where now meditation has become mainstream and yoga has become mainstream. Back in the 1970s, just to finish my story there, I just, I was what you would call a seeker. I knew that there was more. This comment from my father really got me thinking. So I was really looking, and I was fortunate early in my life to come across a meditation technique that was very popular then and, gaining popularity since, which is transcendental meditation, which is the core educational approach at the university where I'm vice president of academic affairs, which you mentioned, Maharishi University of Management in Fairfield. And there are many different techniques of meditation, and certainly a number of techniques that go under the umbrella of mindfulness. And more research is being conducted on those techniques. And there's benefits that have been identified for those. One thing I would point out about transcendental meditation is that it's explicitly designed to produce this result, which I'm describing. Mindfulness techniques, for example, might be, have proven very helpful in helping people relieve pain or helping people concentrate better or be more focused in the moment. The specific value of transcendental meditation, which you can tell by the name, is it allows one to transcend, which means to go beyond, dive inward, go beyond thought, go beyond perception into that ocean of stillness that we all carry deep within. And the really the really valuable thing that's come out of that is an enormous body of scientific research, because now that this experience of transcending, this diving within, this inner experience, like Wordsworth described and so many others, now that it's become repeatable in a laboratory, thanks to TM practice, scientists have studied this experience all over the world. And so we have a very clear picture of what changes in brain functioning and blood biochemistry and physiological functioning, metabolic rate, remarkable changes in the brain.
I've seen many of these videos where they show these monks being hooked up to these brain machines, and some of what is happening when they begin to fall inward. It's pretty amazing stuff. And I agree with you. And I think it's becoming more of common dialogue, more of common knowledge, meditation, yoga. And just the very fact of, I live in the Bible Belt, no judgment, just the fact of the matter. Right. Back when the word yoga was very, very foreign, but at least now they're acclimating to the idea that there's this practice out there. There's someone helping people in our region, because coming from, again, the mindset of the consciousness that's here, it's becoming more and more accepting and allowed, so to speak. And I very much see it changing as well throughout the world.
And that's just a great sign that it no longer seems mysterious or mystical or impractical. It's
reachable.
Yeah, it's really reachable. I mentioned Go ahead, Keith.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mentioned the brain. I like to, if you were to just stop a car on the street and pull out the driver and hook a person up to an EEG machine, you could see right on the computer screen the waves. The way this works is a cap is put over the skull, and there are something like 28 different points on the scalp where electrical leads come out, and they feed into a computer. And so you can see what's happening on the cortex, which is the surface of the brain. You can see by the electrical activity how the brain is behaving. And in a normal person's brain, you can see these waves moving across 28 waves or so, depending on the number of leads coming out of the cap, moving across the brain. And even without analyzing them mathematically, you can see that they're moving quite independently. It's kind of, I would say, random and shifting. And the analogy I use for that is, imagine walking into an orchestra that's about to perform, and what do you hear before the orchestra plays? They're tuning up.
Yeah,
and it's chaos, right?
Yeah, all this dissonance.
It's totally dissonant, and so you have very good players, you have great instruments. But it's dissonant. And why is that? Because they're just each doing their own thing. Now imagine the conductor stepping up to the podium, and he gives a signal. And now imagine that orchestra holds a sustained E chord, let's say. It's the same musicians, it's the same instruments, and now there's this beautiful tone reverberating throughout the hall. What's the difference? It's that those players are playing in coordination with each other, in synchrony with each other. Mm. And the brain is quite like that. Normally, our brains are like that orchestra tuning up. This is what we found through research on transcendental meditation, that within a minute, within 60 seconds of beginning this effortless technique, and I underscore the word effortless, people are not thinking about their brain functioning. They're not trying to alter the way the brain functions. They just practice this effortless technique. The mind spontaneously settles inward, settles down into this very deep state of stillness. And as an automatic byproduct, brain functioning, you can see this on the computer screen with the naked eye, those lines on the screen start to fall into a rhythmic pattern, signaling that all of the different points on the brain, like those players in the orchestra, are now coming into harmony. It's a marvelous thing to see. It's a scientific finding that I think should be making headlines. Now, listeners might ask, okay, I can understand that that's an elegant style of brain functioning, but what's the practical value of it? Well, it turns out that the more coherently, the more in harmony the brain functions, the higher your level of intelligence, literally the higher your IQ, the greater level of coherence in brain functioning, the more creative you are. The higher the coherence in brain functioning, the greater your ability to see the big picture while you're focusing sharply on the parts. And these things that I've mentioned, intelligence, creativity, the ability to see the big picture while you're focusing on the parts, those things typically grow through childhood, and then they level off when we're about age 15, 16, 17. When they level off, that's where they stay until about the mid-20s when intelligence begins declining slowly when we're about 25 and continues declining slowly into older age, amazingly. Nobody has found a way to increase intelligence or this ability to focus on the big picture or other measures of human development after adolescence. But now, with this technique of transcending and inducing the brain to function in the way it was designed to function in this coherent, harmonious way, the research finds that we can actually elevate intelligence after adolescence. You can actually make yourself smarter, more creative. And Keith, you tell me, would it be valuable if we could find a way for people in the world to become more intelligent, better able to see the big picture?
Of course.
It's an obvious answer.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, right.
this is the kind of thing that's really now, this meditation practice, transcendental meditation, it's spreading through schools in the United States. Hundreds of thousands of kids around the world in schools in Latin America, India, Southeast Asia are having the benefit of developing their total potential right from childhood, which is the gift that every child should have.
Yes, yes. Craig, we're at the bottom of the hour. My name is Keith Anthony Blanchard, host of Center of Light Radio. Today, my guest is Mr. Craig Pearson, and we are talking about the supreme awakening, transcendence, higher states of consciousness, being alive, actually. Craig, we're at the bottom of the hour. Would you give out your contact information of how our listening audience can find more about you and the awesome work you are doing in this world, sir?
Yeah, sure. My people can email me directly at cpearson. It's CPEARSON at MUM, M as in mother, U and another M, .edu, cpearson at MUM.edu. The book that you mentioned, called The Supreme Awakening, is available on Amazon. And this book brings together a treasure of descriptions of higher human development, of enlightenment that I've gathered over a period of about 30 years of research, pouring through thousands of books. It is really the ultimate, I would say, in all modesty, anthology of descriptions of enlightenment. And I've put them together in a framework of higher states of consciousness.
Wow, very cool. I appreciate you for saying that, because a lot of people put higher consciousness books together, but the fact that you waited when you were in that state to put them together adds another layer to the onion.
Yeah, well, another layer to the onion is the person who brought the transcendental meditation technique to the West, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, also put forward a model of higher human development that goes well beyond these three states of consciousness that I described that most people normally experience: waking, dreaming, and sleeping. His model of higher human development includes 7 states of consciousness altogether, and the 4 higher states represent stages of enlightenment. So we can actually lay out milestones of growth, of enlightenment. Enlightenment simply means the expression of our full human potential. And so each of those 4 higher stages of consciousness has a name. They're very rigorously defined, well-defined in terms of what changes take place in the body, what changes take place in our experience of ourself and of the world around us. They're very well-defined. And what's been thrilling to me is to look into the literature all over the world and find all of these beautiful experiences, and they fall very neatly into one or the other of these 4 higher stages. So now we actually have not just a notion that people have been experiencing higher human development, but we actually have a roadmap. We have a blueprint with the milestones along the way for what the different stages look like, culminating in the very highest 7th state of consciousness. And so that's all in this book, and it describes this meditation technique and all the research that's been done that validate this experience that people like the Buddha, Plato, and Saint Teresa, and Rabindranath Tagore, and Emerson, and Wordsworth, all of these great geniuses have described. Now that experience is available to anybody, and we understand what it means and what its enormous practical benefits are for for the problems that face us.
Craig, some years ago, I was coming out of sleep. You know that pull that you feel when you're coming out of sleep and you're slowly becoming aware of the room that you live this life beyond this body that's supine on the bed, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm in that space, in that state, and I feel I am submersed in absolute peace. In fact, there's no thought. I didn't even have a thought that, oh, wow, I'm
Beautiful.
in peace, because that would be a thought.
Right.
And I began the breathing process.
Mhm.
And there was no language necessary. There was nothing necessary in harmony, creativity. They were all one idea. It was a place of poetry. That's the only place such amazing poetry, like you read a little earlier, can ever come from, because that's where it is. And I was in that very, very profound, powerful, loud, soft stillness for about 5 minutes with completely no thought. I had no agenda. I had nothing I wanted to do. There was no place I can ever want to be. Just being in that space was enough for me. And I've had those glimpses and touched that space within my heart quite a few times in my life.
That's beautiful, Keith. The hairs on my arms are standing up as I listen to you describe that. That's that's just the experience of consciousness awake to itself without any thought.
And here's the thing,
lately,
this has been part of my talking point lately. When I was there, check this out. There was no story. There was no story of the past, now, or the future. All it was presence.
Beautiful.
And it was everything. So, I mean, if I wanted to know any piece of information, if I wanted to know story in that moment, I probably could have found it. But I'm sure seeking such things would have kicked me out of the out of the experience.
Well,
but I've had that experience many times with Godmen like Satya Sai Baba, but also in other dream states of awareness. Are you able, and I'm asking you this personally, you can choose to decline the answer, but do you find when you're doing your meditations, your transcendental meditations, or because you've been doing it so long now, that some part of you by will alone can just tweak a little bit and you can shift yourself there, though you may not be full blown in the experience as you would love to be? But do you find yourself at least sort of waiting in the water, waiting in that reality, just by thought of it alone?
Yeah, let me comment on that. First of all, it's a beautiful. You described that so beautifully, and what I appreciated about your description, Keith, is that you made clear that it was beyond thought. It was beyond thought. And just to go a little more deeply into it, what you were experiencing was what we would call the gap in between sleeping and waking. But if the mind is sufficiently clear. Normally, when we transition, when we come out of sleep, into waking, or pass from waking into dreaming and sleep, the mind is a little cloudy, and we don't experience that there's actually a gap in between those states. And you're describing a very clear experience of that gap. And what is there in that gap? It's just pure consciousness. It's just yourself, your ultimate self, your unbounded self, your innermost self, just pure silent stillness. And that experience was clear enough for you that you were able to discern that it was beyond, it was outside of time, it was outside of space. That experience is literally transcendental. Transcendental means outside of time, outside of space. It's not just another thought, it's beyond thought. So that's very clear. In answer to your question,
when I was there, I didn't have any thought at all, but I did recognize when I was laying, I think it was on a beach. But anyway, I was looking at a sun. Mm-hmm. And of course, even though I didn't have thought, my consciousness recognized the reflection of myself that we would call that the sun. And in that experience, I knew that when I woke up, if I could write the word sun down, S-U-N, that would have all this amazing impact. And I wouldn't have to write a full-blown sentence to describe it. That being said, it wouldn't translate, but then again, I guess it could, depending on the energy I delivered to the paper, to the document. But my point is, there was such an amazing simplicity there.
Beautiful.
If I could find the words to describe exactly what it was like, I just love the whole idea of this topic and that we're talking about it. 888-919-2355. 888-919-2355 is the number you call into the show to talk to myself or my phenomenal guest, Mr. Dr. Craig Pearson.
Keith, you asked, do I experience that in my meditation practice?
Yes.
Absolutely. That's the whole purpose of transcendental meditation. It just, right from the beginning, right from the start when you learn it, I want to emphasize effortlessly, no attempt to focus or control the mind or manipulate anything. That's what distinguishes it. It just sets up the proper initial condition, and then the mind spontaneously dives within into the experience that you're describing so beautifully.
Thank you.
And here's the thing, just to answer your question a little further. With this technique, when you have the transcending experience regularly, and TM is practiced 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon, when you have that experience regularly, the mind becomes acculturated, habituated to that experience. Brain functioning, I mentioned, during TM practice shifts into this remarkably coherent state of functioning. That coherent brain functioning begins to carry over into your daily experience outside of meditation. It comes to be the normal style of brain functioning. The brain begins to function even outside of meditation the way it was designed to function. And this experience of inner quiet, inner silence, inner freedom begins to be maintained effortlessly outside of meditation. So you use the phrase by pure will alone. There's no will power involved. It's just, you just dive within, you come out, you dive within in the afternoon, you come out. You do that day after day, week after week. Gradually over time, the mind begins to maintain that experience of unboundedness, freedom, happiness at all times, 24/7.
Yeah, the vibration of that world, of that dimension, of that space rather, becomes active within your matrix. From the chat room we have from Don Danny, he asked a question. Mr. Pearson, where would you place out-of-body experiences? In which level of consciousness? Good question, actually.
That's a very good question. Out-of-body experiences are definitely an experience. The way I understand, out-of-body experiences, as most people would understand, involves the experience of a separation of the mind from the body. So, for example, you're hit by a truck, or you're on the operating table, and the mind, for some period of time, floats free from the body. And sometimes people report the experience of being able to look at the body lying there on the road or on the operating table or whatever. The experiences that I'm describing of higher human consciousness represent something, I would say, at the other end of the spectrum, of greater integration of mind and body. Rather than a separation of mind and body, greater integration of mind and body. When we see brain functioning in a more integrated way, this is a reflection of greater integration of mind and body. Let me take that one step further. People might ask, these higher stages of human development, why aren't we experiencing them all the time? The reason is that the human body, the human nervous system is just stressed. We live in a stressful world. We have deep-rooted stresses, deep-seated stresses, strains, fatigue. Those are like clouds in front of the sun. So our task is just to somehow wash away the stress from the body. And just as up in the sky when it's a cloudy day and the clouds blow away, the sun has been there all the time, but now the clouds are gone. The sun just shines for us. So if we can, if we can effectively dissolve stress from the body, and this again comes around to enabling the body, cultivating the body to function the way it was designed to function, get those clouds of stress out of the body, then spontaneously we will have these kinds of experiences that we're describing. And this is what transcendental meditation does, because in that deep state of silence that one experiences, remember Wordsworth describing a very deep state of rest. This is what happens. The body gains a very deep state of rest, which allows the body to dissolve stress with exceptional efficiency. You go to a doctor with any ailment, doesn't matter what your ailment is, the doctor will always say at least one thing all the time, and that is get plenty of rest. And why is that? Because when you rest, you give the body a chance to use its built-in repair mechanisms to reestablish balance, to dissolve stress and fatigue. So during TM practice, this brings about a very deep state of rest. The body just throws off stress, washes it away, and that's why there's so many health benefits associated with TM practice.
Wayne Dyer,
longer life, better heart health, lower risk of heart attacks and stroke.
Yes.
Doctors prescribe it for that very reason.
Wayne Dyer said that he feels more rested after 1 hour of meditation than he does with a full night's sleep.
Well, there you go. There you go. It's a different kind of rest. Sleep.
Sure. It's total.
We'd never say that meditation is a substitute for sleep. People get too little sleep already as it is today, putting their health at risk. So it's not a substitute for sleep, but it's a style of rest that enables the body to wash away fatigue very efficiently. And when you do that, everything goes better in your life right from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. So Craig, let me ask you this question. How can you or anyone tell if someone is truly enlightened?
Well, that's a very good question. The answer is you can't tell from the outside. People might say, well, that person seems always so happy. They're energetically, very high energy level. They must be enlightened. That tells you something about a person, but enlightenment really is a matter of how one experiences oneself and how one experiences the environment. It's a matter of inner subjective experience. And you can't tell that by how one behaves from the outside. You could go and you're either the person who's repairing your car, the person who, comes to, fix your plumbing could be enlightened as far as you know. The sole criterion is that person experiencing unbounded awareness all the time? Is that person's brain functioning in a way that's integrated, coherent all the time? It doesn't matter their profession, their age, their gender, their sexual orientation. None of that matters. It's just that, and that really cannot be seen from the outside. Now, having said that, people who are enlightened, you would expect, because they're living in a state of deep perpetual peace and perpetual bliss, that they would be happier, they would be more productive, they would be more successful in their life. So it's not surprising to see that. I'm just saying that's not an absolute criteria from the outside.
So you were mentioning a minute ago about the sun is always shining, regardless of the overcast skies, right? And when I work with people, I share with them all the time that you are not your thoughts, you are not your feelings. Don't take this stuff personally.
Right.
And so it's a matter of becoming grounded. And I use that very technique. Imagine that your thoughts are just clouds moving through your mind, and they become anchored or they become real when you begin to grab whatever one you grab in that moment. You are conscious, you're selecting it. And therefore, it begins the process of what it does to the physiology in the body. How are you going to respond to it? What are your body movements now that you chose this thought? What are your feelings parallel with all that? So I agree with the state of meditation. I've been practicing for years. My life has progressed in such a way that I now live my life doing the practice of open-eyed meditation. I'm always finding myself falling into my center often, so much so that I'm catching myself. But the fact that I'm doing this, the intervals between my catching myself being outside of the space, those intervals are getting smaller and smaller.
Well, that sounds like a good result, and it is it is helpful to understand that we are not our thoughts and we're not our emotions, and that can be helpful. We've all had the experience of the opposite experience of just being overwhelmed by our emotions or overwhelmed by trains of thought. So it's good to have that understanding. Even better is to give yourself the experience of literally transcending thought and having the firsthand immediate experience of one's unbounded self deep inside. For readers who may be saying, skeptics out there who may be saying, okay, this all sounds well and good. What's the practical value of all of this? I should mention that the practical value of this transcending experience, diving within, as elicited by transcendental meditation, has been brought into some of the most challenging problems. I'm thinking here of veterans who come home with severe PTSD and they're completely non-functional. They can't function with their families. They can't hold a job. A number of research studies our university is doing a study now sponsored by the U.S. Army on the effect of transcendental meditation on PTSD. And there have been several other studies that show almost immediate results in prisons, with substance abuse, in the workplace where there's high stress, among high-risk kids in inner-city schools who live in levels of stress that are almost beyond imagining, among homeless men, among abused women and girls. These very high-stress situations, the stress really begins to melt away within a few days of their learning transcendental meditation. So even the hardcore problems where almost nothing else has worked, this experience of transcending, abstract though it might seem, really melts stress away and brings people their life back.
Craig, we're at the top of the hour. I have one short question, sir, and this is from Pirate Jim in the chat room. He says, is there any evidence for the use of TM for treatment of depression or anxiety? If so, how effective is it compared to mainstream treatments like cognitive behavioral therapy and psychoanalytic psychotherapy? We have only 2 minutes, sir.
Yes. Transcendental meditation, because it brings balance to the brain, it stimulates brain functioning to be more coherent. It releases stress from the body. So much of what ails us in the modern world, whether it's heart disease or mental disorders, these are exacerbated at the very least by stress. So if there's a way to dissolve stress from the physiology, that's going to support any kind of modality that somebody may have. And I wouldn't say that transcendental meditation is a substitute for professional therapy. But if one is undergoing therapy, then by all means, add transcendental meditation to the regimen, and the results are going to be much more effective.
Totally
and certainly
meditation did wonders for me when I was a stressed out individual. Craig, we're at the top of the hour. Timelessness does exist.
This has
that went by fast, didn't it?
Oh man, that went by so fast. Really stimulating to speak with you, Keith.
Thank you kindly. Give out your contact information once more, sir.
Sure, I'm at Pearson, CPEARSON @MUM.edu. My website is craigpearson.mum.edu, and my book, The Supreme Awakening, is available on Amazon.
What's next for you, sir, shortly?
I'm working on a couple of other books. I'm looking at the experience of transcending in the Christian tradition. That'll be a book I hope to publish in a year or so. I'm collaborating on a book on tentatively titled 7 Steps to an Ageless Brain, avoiding Alzheimer's, which brings together all of the best practices for maintaining a healthy brain, but with special focus on adding this technique of transcendental meditation to integrate brain functioning, because Alzheimer's is really the disintegration of the brain, literally the disintegration of the brain. So that can be countered directly by cultivating integrated brain functioning and staving off this train wreck at the end of so many people's lives.
Thank you for being a wonderful guest here on Center of Light Radio, Mr. Pearson. I appreciate you greatly.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for hosting me.
You bet on that. Everyone, Keith Anthony Blanchard here. Next week, my guest is Ann Sermons Gillis, and we will be speaking about words make a difference. Power up and spread the light, y'all. I'll see you next Monday night. Peace, love, and light. Take care now.